When I walked into the office break room and saw the cake that read "Congrats, loser," I knew my career at Meridian Tech was over. But what I discovered about who ordered that cake and what I did about it destroyed more than just my job. It exposed a conspiracy that had been ruining my life for 3 years, and my revenge changed everything. Let me back up and tell you exactly how I got to that moment, because the story doesn't start with the cake. It starts with me thinking I had finally won. My name is Cassandra Rivers. And at 32 years old, I thought I had my life figured out. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Clearwater Falls, Oregon, one of those Pacific Northwest towns that looks like it was designed by someone who really loves coffee shops and bookstores. The kind of place where everyone drives a Subaru and has strong opinions about local honey. I'd been working at Meridian Tech for 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days. Not that I was counting or anything. The company specialized in digital marketing solutions for mid-sized businesses, which sounds boring until you realize how much money there is in helping people sell things online. We occupied the top 3 floors of the Whitmore building downtown, with floor 2 ceiling windows that looked out over the Cascade River. My official title was Senior Marketing Analyst, but really, I was the person who made everyone else look good. That colleague who actually reads the reports, shows up to meetings prepared, and remembers what was discussed last time. That was me, the reliable one. The one who stayed late to fix other people's mistakes and came in early to prep for presentations that had my name nowhere on them. I worked in what they generously called an open concept workspace on the 2nd floor, which was really just a fancy way of saying cubicles without walls. My desk was positioned perfectly so I could see everyone coming and going, which meant I also got to witness every office drama, every whispered conversation, and every dramatic entrance. Sometimes I felt like the narrator of everyone else's professional soap opera. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I arrived at exactly 7:45 a.m. early enough to show dedication, but not so early that I looked desperate. I had my usual routine down to a science: large coffee with oat milk from Beacon's Brew across the street, check emails while the computer booted up, review the day's priorities, and mentally prepare for whatever chaos my colleagues would inevitably create. But that Tuesday was different because of one email that was waiting in my inbox when I logged in. The subject line read, "Congratulations, promotion notification." My heart actually skipped a beat. I clicked it open with hands that were suddenly shaking just a little bit. "Dear Cassandra, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for promotion to Team Lead, Digital Strategy, effective immediately. This position comes with a 20% salary increase and relocation to Office 3B on the executive floor. Please see Jenna Hartwell in HR at your earliest convenience to discuss the details. Congratulations on this well-deserved advancement. Best regards, Miranda Blackstone, Director of Human Resources." I read it 3 times before it sank in. Then I read it again because I couldn't quite believe it was real. Team Lead for Digital Strategy, the position I'd been working toward since my first day at Meridian Tech, the job that would finally prove I belonged in the same conversations as the people who got invited to the important meetings. I may have done a small victory dance in my chair. Okay, it wasn't that small. Patricia Fleming from accounting definitely saw me and gave me a look that suggested she was questioning my professionalism. But I didn't care. For once in my carefully controlled, always appropriate career, I let myself feel genuinely excited. The executive floor, Office 3B, I'd walked past it a dozen times during my tenure at Meridian Tech, always wondering what it would be like to have a real office with a door that closed and windows that actually opened. No more listening to Derek Rothschild's phone conversations with his personal trainer. No more watching Simone Valdez eat her lunch while typing with greasy fingers. No more pretending not to notice when Bradford Chen fell asleep at his desk. After long weekends, I spent the next hour in a sort of productive days, responding to emails and updating spreadsheets while mentally redecorating my future office. I was thinking about what kind of plants would work best by the windows when Marlo Kensington appeared at my desk. Marlo was our creative director, which at Meridian Tech meant she was in charge of making everything look sophisticated while The rest of us did the actual work. She was one of those women who somehow managed to look effortlessly put together every single day, perfect blowout. Designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and the kind of confidence that came from never having to wonder if she belonged in a room. "Cassie," she said, using the nickname I'd never given her permission to use, "I heard the most interesting news this morning." She perched on the edge of my desk like we were best friends. Which we definitely were not. Marlo and I had what I'd generously call a professional relationship. She delegated projects to me, I completed them perfectly, and she took credit for the results. It was a system that worked. Even if it wasn't exactly fair. Oh, I tried to keep my voice neutral. But I was pretty sure my excitement was showing. "Little birds are saying someone got some very good news today." Her smile was the kind that looked warm but felt calculating. "Congratulations are in order, I think." I couldn't help but grin. "Thanks, Marlo. I'm really excited about the opportunity." "I'm sure you are." She studied her perfectly manicured nails. "It's quite a leap, isn't it, from analyst to team lead? Some people might say it's ambitious." There was something in her tone that made my stomach twist slightly. But I pushed the feeling aside. I've been working toward this for 3 years. I think I'm ready. "Oh, I'm sure you think you are." She stood up and smoothed down her skirt. "Well, enjoy your moment, Cassie. These things have a way of working themselves out." She walked away before I could ask what she meant by that, leaving me with a vague sense of unease that I couldn't quite shake. But I told myself I was being paranoid. Marlo was probably just surprised by the news. It wasn't like we'd ever been particularly close, and maybe she'd been hoping the promotion would go to someone in her department. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of congratulations from colleagues who seemed genuinely happy for me. Patricia from accounting brought me a Danish from the bakery downstairs. Derek actually stopped talking about his workout routine long enough to shake my hand. Even Bradford looked up from his computer screen to give me a thumbs up. By lunch time, I was feeling pretty good about life. I decided to treat myself to something better than my usual desk salad, so I walked downtown to Riverside Cafe. This little place that did amazing grain bowls and had the kind of atmosphere that made you feel like you were in a magazine spread about work-life balance. I was sitting by the window, picking at my quinoa and trying to calculate how much of a difference 20% would make to my monthly budget, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Congrats on the big promotion, can't wait to see how this plays out." A friend. I stared at the message for a long moment. The emoji felt somehow sarcastic, and the phrase "how this plays out" seemed oddly ominous. I tried calling the number, but it went straight to an automated voicemail that didn't identify the caller. I told myself it was probably just someone from the office playing around, maybe someone who'd gotten my number from the company directory. People did weird things when they were bored. I deleted the message and tried to focus on my lunch. But the good mood from the morning was starting to fade around the edges. Walking back to the office, I noticed things I'd never paid attention to before, like how the security guard, Roberto Valdez, seemed to watch me a little too carefully as I walked through the lobby. Or how the elevator operator, Mrs. Chen, gave me a smile that looked more sympathetic than congratulatory. I was probably imagining things, success paranoia, maybe. When you'd spent 3 years being overlooked and underestimated, suddenly being recognized could feel surreal. Back at my desk, I threw myself into work, trying to finish up loose ends before transitioning to my new role. I had reports to complete, projects to hand off, and about 17 different spreadsheets that needed updating. The kind of detailed, methodical work that usually calmed my nerves. Round to 15, my phone rang. The caller ID showed HR Jenna Hartwell. "Cassandra, hi, it's Jenna from HR. I know you're probably busy, but I was wondering if you could pop down to the break room in about 15 minutes. We have a little something for you, a little something. Oh, you know how it is around here. We like to celebrate our success stories, nothing big. Just a few people who wanted to congratulate you properly." I felt a flutter of warmth in my chest. Despite all the weird vibes I'd been picking up, my colleagues wanted to celebrate with me. Maybe I really had been imagining the strange looks and cryptic comments. That's so sweet. I'll be right down. Perfect. See you at 2:30. I spent the next 15 minutes tidying up my desk and practicing gracious acceptance speeches in my head. I'd never been great at being the center of attention. But I figured I could handle a few minutes of awkward office celebration. Maybe. There would be cake. I like cake. At exactly 2:30, I made my way down to the break room on the first floor. It was a decent-sized space with a few round tables, a refrigerator that constantly hummed like it was plotting something, and a coffee machine that made beverages that were technically coffee but barely qualified as drinkable. I could hear voices coming from inside as I approached, which made sense. Office gatherings were never quiet affairs. People would be chatting, maybe laughing, probably complaining about work while simultaneously celebrating someone's advancement. Standard corporate social dynamics. I took a deep breath, put on my best gracious smile, and opened the door. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the comfortable kind of silence that happens when people are focused on something pleasant, but the sharp, sudden kind that happens when everyone stops talking at exactly the same moment. The second thing I noticed was that there were definitely more people in the room than I'd expected. Not just a few colleagues, but what looked like most of the office. People were standing around the edges of the room, some leaning against the walls, others sitting at the tables. All of them were looking at me with expressions that weren't quite friendly, but weren't exactly hostile either. The third thing I noticed was the cake. It sat in the center of the main table, a sheet cake with white frosting and blue decorative borders. The kind of cake you'd order from a grocery store bakery when you needed something that looked celebratory but didn't want to spend too much money. The writing on top was in elegant blue script. Congrats, loser. I stood in the doorway for what felt like several minutes but was probably only a few seconds, trying to process what I was seeing. The words didn't make sense. They didn't fit with anything that was supposed to be happening. Surprise, someone called out from the back of the room, but their voice sounded flat, almost sarcastic. A few people started clapping, but it was the kind of slow, deliberate clapping that you might hear at a golf tournament, not the enthusiastic applause you'd expect at a celebration. The sound echoed strangely in the break room, bouncing off the walls and the ceiling tiles. I looked around the room, trying to find a friendly face, someone who might explain what was happening. But everyone was watching me with the same carefully neutral expression, like they were waiting to see how I would react. Jenna Hartwell stepped forward from somewhere near the coffee machine. She was wearing her usual professional smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. Cassandra, there you are. We wanted to do a little something to mark this transition. Transition? My voice sounded strange in my own ears, higher than usual. Your new position, of course. Jenna gestured toward the cake. We thought you might appreciate some recognition for all your hard work. I stared at the cake again. Congrats, loser. The words seemed to get bigger and more prominent the longer I looked at them. I don't understand, I said finally. Don't you? This voice came from the back of the room. And I turned to see Marlo Kensington stepping forward. She looked the same as she had earlier, perfectly put together, completely confident, but there was something different about her expression, something that looked almost like amusement. The cake, I said stupidly. What about it? Marlo tilted her head, as if she genuinely didn't understand my confusion. It says loser. Does it? She looked at the cake as if she were seeing it for the first time. Oh my goodness, you're right. How strange. Jenna, didn't you order this cake? All eyes turned to Jenna, who looked briefly flustered before recovering her professional composure. Well, yes, but I certainly didn't request that message. The bakery must have made an error. What a terrible mistake, Marlo said, but she didn't sound like she thought it was terrible at all. How embarrassing for everyone involved. The room was still silent except for the humming of the refrigerator and the occasional shuffle of feet. I could feel everyone watching me, waiting to see what I would do next. Part of me wanted to laugh it off, to make a joke about bakery mix-ups and move on with my life. Part of me wanted to demand an explanation, to ask why anyone would think this was appropriate. But mostly, I just wanted to disappear. Instead, I stood there like an idiot, staring at a cake that called me a loser while my colleagues watched and waited for my reaction. That's when I realized this wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. And everyone in this room knew it, standing in that break room, staring at the cake that called me a loser. I felt something shift inside my chest. It was like the moment when you're walking on what you think is solid ground and suddenly realize you're standing on thin ice. Well, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, this is certainly unexpected. A few people in the room shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. The refrigerator hummed louder, as if it was trying to fill the awkward silence. Marlo stepped closer, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor. You know what, Cassie? Since there's obviously been some kind of mix-up with the cake, why don't we just skip the whole celebration? I'm sure everyone has work to get back to. But I wasn't ready to let this go. Not yet. Something about the way she said mix-up made it clear that this wasn't accidental. The timing was too perfect, the setup too elaborate. You don't accidentally order a cake that says congrats, loser, for someone's promotion party. Actually, I said, looking directly at Marlo, I'm curious about something. Jenna, you said you ordered this cake. Jenna nodded quickly, her professional smile flickering. Yes, from Peterson's Bakery on Highland Avenue. I specifically requested a congratulations cake. This is clearly their error. That's interesting, I said, pulling out my phone. Because Peterson's Bakery has been closed for renovations for the past 2 weeks. I know because I drive past it every day on my way to work. The silence in the room became deafening. I watched Jenna's face go through several shades of pale before settling on something that looked like panic. Oh, she stammered. I must have. Maybe it was Morrison's Bakery or Sweet Dreams on Oak Street. I place orders all the time. It's hard to keep track of Jenna, I said softly. What bakery did you really order this cake from? Before she could answer, Bradford Chen spoke up from somewhere near the water cooler. Actually, I saw Marlo carrying a cake box into the building this morning around 7:30. I was coming back from my morning run. All eyes turned to Marlo, whose perfect composure finally cracked just slightly. For just a moment, I saw something flash across her face, surprise, maybe, or annoyance at being caught. I have no idea what Bradford thinks he saw, she said coolly, but I certainly didn't order any cake. Then where did it come from? I asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. Nobody answered. Nobody moved. The room felt like a theater, where all the actors had suddenly forgotten their lines. That's when I noticed something else. Patricia from accounting was holding her phone, and the screen was lit up like she was recording. When she saw me looking, she quickly turned it off and shoved it into her pocket. Patricia, I said, were you filming this? She shook her head. Too quickly. No, of course not. I was just checking my messages, but I'd seen the red recording light. I was sure of it. A horrible realization started creeping up from my stomach into my throat. This wasn't just a mean prank. This was organized, planned, and they were documenting it. How many of you knew about this? I asked the room. No one answered, but I saw several people exchange glances, quick looks that said everything I needed to know. All of you, I said quietly. You all knew? Derek Rothschild, who'd congratulated me so enthusiastically that morning, couldn't meet my eyes. Simone Valdez was studying her shoes like they held the secrets of the universe. Even Roberto, the security guard, was standing in the doorway looking uncomfortable. This was planned, I continued, my voice getting stronger. The promotion announcement, the party invitation, the cake, all of it. Marlo sighed dramatically. Cassie, you're being paranoid. It's just an unfortunate bakery error that. Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop lying to me. I walked over to the cake and looked at it more closely. The frosting work was actually quite good, professional quality, the kind of decorating you'd pay extra for. Someone had put thought and money into this. You know what's funny? I said, still staring at the cake. 3 years I've worked here. 3 years of staying late, covering for people, fixing other people's mistakes. 3 years of being the reliable one, the one who never complains, never makes waves. I turned back to face the room. And this is what I get for it. Cassandra, Jenna started. I think you're misunderstanding. Am I? I looked at her, then at Marlo, then at all the faces surrounding me, because from where I'm standing, it looks like my entire office conspired to humiliate me on what was supposed to be one of the best days of my career. The silence stretched. On. Someone's stomach growled. The coffee machine made a gurgling sound. Finally, Marlowe spoke. You want honesty, Cassie, fine. The truth is, some of us were surprised by your promotion. You're competent, sure, but team leader, that's a big responsibility. Maybe too big for me, specifically, you're not exactly leadership material, she said with a shrug. You're more of a behind-the-scenes person. Support staff. There's nothing wrong with that. The words hit me like a physical blow. Support staff. Exactly. Know your place, and you'll be much happier. That's when everything clicked into place. The weird looks I'd been getting all morning, the cryptic text message, the way people had been treating me like I was some kind of fraud. They didn't think I deserved the promotion. They thought I was a loser who'd somehow gotten lucky, and they'd decided to put me back in my place. I see, I said quietly. I looked around the room one more time, memorizing faces. These people weren't my colleagues. They weren't my friends. They were bullies and business casual who'd spent their Tuesday afternoon planning my humiliation. Well, I said, reaching for my purse, thank you all for clarifying things. I started walking toward the door, but stopped next to the cake table. Everyone was watching me, probably expecting tears or anger or some kind of dramatic breakdown. Instead, I smiled. You know what, you're absolutely right. I'm not leadership material. I picked up the cake with both hands. I'm something much more dangerous than that, and then I turned the entire cake upside down on the break room floor. The sound of it hitting the linoleum was spectacular, a wet, satisfying splat that sent frosting and crumbs flying in every direction. A few people gasped. Someone laughed nervously. I quit, I announced to the room, effective immediately. And then I walked out, leaving them standing in a break room covered in cake and their own petty cruelty. But I wasn't done yet, not even close. Because they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated exactly what this support staff loser was capable of when properly motivated.